Middle East in which Al-Qaeda was bubbling up from the surface and had been created essentially in Saudi Arabia and was bubbling up from the surface? Is that the Middle East in which Saddam Hussein was putting 300,000 people in mass graves, flying, shooting at our aircraft practically every day, seeking weapons of mass destruction, threatening to invade Kuwait again? Was that the Middle East in which Syrian forces were deep into Lebanon, probably helping to assassinate Lebanese leaders? Which Middle East was it that was so great? Was that the Middle East in which Palestinians had launched a second intifada after Camp David failed, and Israelis were dying, not just Israelis and Palestinians were dying, not just in the far reaches of Gaza, but in Tel Aviv? So when I look back, that Middle East doesn't look so great. And I look at the current Middle East, and I know it's very tough, but I see the following new pillars. I see in Iraq, which the most strategically important country in the Middle East, which used to be an implacable enemy of the United States, ruled by a maniacal dictator who did kill his own people, used weapons of mass destruction, and I see that replaced by a, to be sure, fragile, but democratic government in Iraq that is responsive to its people, that is going to be a bulwark against Iran because the Iraqis don't care for the Iranians and don't want them in their affairs. So I see that Iraq as potentially a very important part of the Middle East. I see a Lebanon in which we have a democratically elected, Western-oriented government. Syrian forces are gone. That turns out to be important. I see a Palestinian leadership that is split, to be sure, but one part of it, under Mahmoud Abbas, that has given up on violence, believes in negotiation, is trying to build a decent life for people in the West Bank. And I see in Iran a very interesting phenomenon. I see that these bloody tyrants wanted somehow legitimacy. And so they held a fake election. And then they tried to win the fake election by more than they might have wanted. And so 51% wasn't enough, it had to be 62.2%. And surprise, surprise, people reacted against that. And I don't care whether this regime lasts a year, or 3 years, or 5 years, it's done. It has lost any sense of legitimacy with its own people. This is a country in which the great majority, something I believe like 70% of the people are under the age of 35. And what now is their seminal political memory? It is what happened in Tehran in the streets. And so they've lost their best and their brightest forever. And in part, they lost it because the world turned on Ahmadinejad and he was shown to be incompetent as well as a dictator. And that's a healthy development in Iran. Now, I feel for those people in the streets and the way that this brutal regime will put them down. But it's now a hollow shell. And if we don't do anything to prop it up, just like the Soviet Union was a hollow shell, it too will collapse. I don't know if it'll be next year or 5 years from now, but the Iranian regime, I believe, is done.